First, let me thank everyone for sticking with us. So just in your interest, everyone slide your chairs back just a bit so you have a little bit of free room. I don't see anybody doing what I'm asking you guys to do. And then everybody stand up. It's only weird if you don't do this, by the way. Give the person next to you a high five. All right, and have a seat. Go ahead and have a seat. That has nothing to do with anything I want to talk about. I just wanted to make sure the blood was circulating so that you could stay with me during this talk. My name is David LaFrance. I'm the CEO for the American Water Works Association. It is an honor to be here with all of you. I've got several things to talk about, but I did want to start off because I think many of you are unfamiliar with the American Water Works Association. So I wanted to tell you just a little bit about our background. We are the oldest and the largest water association in the world. We always like to start off saying that. It doesn't really tell you much about what we do, but we were created in 1881. 1881 was an interesting year. There were 3 presidents that year. Billy the Kid was shot. The American Red Cross was founded, so we're in that vintage, along with the U.S. Tennis Association. We all kind of came on at that time. But for those of you from Michigan, and as long as I do this correctly, right, this is the state. Did I get that right? This is the state. Yeah, thank you. I learned this the first time I came in here. This is the state, and there was, in that year, there was a fire on the Thumb, right? There was a drought the year before in Michigan. The Thumb caught on fire, and about 300 people died from that fire, all from the drought. This is also a time 2 years before the Flint water system was created. So we were here 2 years before the Flint water system was created, and so the Flint water system came in 2 years later. The pictures that I have on here mostly just sort of show our vintage, but that one graph, which is the declining graph, is a marker for us. This is the efforts by the folks in the American Water Works Association to put operational treatment processes in place to help solve typhoid and waterborne disease in the U.S. That is who we were. Today we are an organization that does more than simply water quality. We stick to those roots of water quality and making sure to protect water, but we are the only standards writing organization in the water space. So if you buy a pipe that you're going to use in California and you take it to Florida, they're going to fit together if they're built to AWWA standards. And that goes for all the other things that are made to our standards as well. We've also have over 50 manuals of practice. If there's an issue that you have related to water, we probably have a manual of practice, and many of those we've sent to Jolisa and to the MDEQ. When all of this happened, my phone started ringing. Keith, who was up here earlier, called me. We got to know each other, and then suddenly we were able to start not just providing people, but also providing some literature resources put together by our members. And then, we do more than just as I was talking about that drought on the Thumb. We do a lot more than just everything from the source to the tap. We do a lot having to do with other parts, and I will touch on some of that. I did want to talk a little bit about why coming here was important to AWWA, but also to me as an individual. The events that have happened here in Flint have touched all the water professionals that I work with and that I know deeply. In fact, I was, about a year ago, I was stranded in India because my flights were delayed because of a storm on the East Coast. And while I was getting to know people who were also stranded in my hotel, I bumped into some guys from Germany and also another guy who actually lived 40 minutes away from where I live in Denver, Colorado. And we got to talking, and the guys in Germany started asking me, without knowing what I did for a living, they started asking me, so why is it you guys are putting lead in the water in Michigan? And I said, well, do you really want to know? And they said, well, yeah, we don't understand that. I said, because I know a little thing about that. And so about an hour and a half later, they decided that being stranded in Mumbai, India with me was not the best thing that they'd ever chosen to do. So this also, it underscores really how critical water is to our way of life, our community. And if I were to, there's many things I've been impressed with today, but if I were to give you just one thing that I think Michigan can hold as being number one in, is that your political officials understand how critical water is to our way of life, to our economies, to our environment, and really to everything that we do, both in terms of public health and everything else. So I think that is really fantastic, and if nothing else, as much as I want Detroit to be the greenest community in the world, if nothing else, you definitely have the attention of the politicians, and I wish every other politician would follow suit. And mostly, I've had the great benefit of learning a lot here, and I hope to share a little bit that will help all of you. And in terms of those not nice meetings, I will give you a couple things you can take away so that we can declare this a not a nice meeting. But last thing is just to let you know that AWWA is committed to the future. We're committed to protecting families today as we work towards a future without lead service lines and where we can protect public health, which is our roots. Our roots are about protecting public health, and our vision is about a better world through better water. And what I find the most amazing is we've had several versions of this graphic that you have on the screen showing a lead service line. And if we were back 5 years ago, most people don't even know that there is a lead service line. So it is amazing how our communities across the nation have come to understand some of the complexities about something that seems so simple, just having drinking water. So let me hit a couple of agenda items, just giving you high level. I think I'm the only one who's really, really not from Michigan who's been up here on the stage. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview on the state of the water industry nationwide, a little bit into Canada, but mostly just the US. I want to reflect on the 21st Century Infrastructure Report, which I've had the opportunity to go through and just touch on that a little bit. But I really want to talk about effective utility management, which is the big lesson that I think we can take going forward. So as we look at the U.S. and how the U.S. gets water, we've heard the statistic of 53,000 community water systems, which is what I'm showing you here. I'm showing you in these orange bar graphs how water is provided by size of utility. And then in the red, I'm showing you the populations served by the different size utilities. So what the big takeaway is, without having to think real hard about this, is that 82%, just remember the numbers 82 and 8, okay, 82 and 8. 82% of our utilities are very small, and they serve 8% of the population, okay? And at the other end of the spectrum, 8% of the utilities are really large, and they serve 82% of the population. Now, Flint is right in between, in terms of population served, right in between these two big red bars, right? So think about that. There are a few utilities in this nation serving almost everybody, and there are most utilities in this nation serving very few. That in itself creates a whole dynamic in terms of cost efficiency, in terms of complying with regulations, in terms of communicating to your customers and your members and your stakeholders. So this is sort of the backdrop that create the complexities that you're hearing about. Then we also talked to all of our members, right? AWWA has about 50,000 members, just over 50,000 members. Don't confuse that with the fact that there's 53,000 water utilities, because they're not the same groups, but we have over 50,000 members, and we survey them every year. And we ask them what are the most important things that the water sector is grappling with. And in a yet to be distributed, it's going to come out at the end of this month, the results for 2017 are this, for the top three, right? We have renewals and replacements of infrastructure, we have financing of capital improvements, and then we have the long-term water supply availability. So let me just talk a little bit about those first two. We've been talking about them all day, right? How do we repair and replace the existing infrastructure? That will extend into lead service lines, right? As people are talking about it in this survey, they're talking about the portion that has traditionally always been defined as the utility or the community portion. And then the really, really difficult question of how do you pay for that? And then when we ask them to put this on a scale of 1 to 5. So, come on, boop, there we go. So in each of these cases, the scores are up in the high end of 4, telling you that on average, the people who took the survey said that these are super critical problems to solve. But more important is the fact, these numbers I'm putting up here, is this is the percent of people responding who said it is a 5, who said it is the most important thing to respond to. So you've got almost 6 in 10 people saying these are the top 3, scoring them at the level of 5. And I think that just goes to sort of the concerns that we have. And now I just talk a little bit about where did those concerns come from. Again, going back into time, everything that we do today as it relates to water is built upon something that has come before us. And the infrastructure concerns that we have today related to water are based upon investments that have been made in the past. And what this graphic is showing you is the investment in dollars in pipes that were put under the ground, what we would call the buried system. One of the speakers before me talked about how it's out of sight. I think it was the governor. He spoke about how it's out of sight and out of mind. And the miles of pipe that are buried in our communities. And when they're buried, of course, they aren't thought of. You don't see those leaks as fast as you see a pothole. And that creates a challenge for us. But what I want you to notice, and let me highlight this just a bit so that it's easier to see on this graphic, is that big bulge in investment started after World War II, right? 77 years ago, that big bulge happened. And so all of those, how many assets do you own that have lasted 77 years? Yeah, none, right? But the pipes in the ground, those investments in the pipes in the grounds are still there, and they're running past their age and their usefulness, and they need to be replaced. And it has a price tag associated with it, and that price tag is, how did this, we tend to say, how did this get here? Because we didn't have to take care of it when it was coming along. Or maybe we did have to take care of it, and that's part of why the price tag is coming along. We estimate at AWWA, our estimate, you heard earlier some estimates, but our estimate is that for the United States only, that this cost over the next 25 years is $1 trillion cost, roughly broken up into 2 different components. One component is to replace the existing infrastructure as it sits today, and then the other component, which is about the other half, is for estimating the infrastructure that has to be put into the ground to serve based upon where people are moving and the shifting of that. And this is just drinking water infrastructure. We're in the process right now of trying to do a similar sort of estimate for wastewater, but all other estimates that have done, people who've done both estimates, they're roughly about the same. So that's another $1 trillion approximately. And our goal wasn't really to create the next $1 trillion challenge, but that is exactly how it came out to be. It's actually slightly less than that, but for the sake of the discussion, it's basically $1 trillion. To put that into a framework, because none of us can imagine what $1 trillion really looks like. It means that for over 25 years, for every hour of the day, for the entire time, $4.6 million on buried infrastructure needs to be spent. So in the time that I'm up here talking, we're going to be about $2.3 million short. Now, I spoke earlier about how buried infrastructure is extending to include service lines. And, traditionally there is this debate about who owns the service line. And you even heard about it some here with the earlier speakers. And part of the challenge of why don't we know where all these service lines are is because they're not part of the traditional asset base of a water utility. But yet the water that the water utility provides goes through that and into the home, right? So quickly communities are coming to the idea that while it is true that they may not have made the initial investment and therefore it's not the asset, it is an asset of their integrated system. And so we went about trying to put some order to that for our members about what does that look like. Earlier you heard Bob say that there's 10 million lead service lines out in the country. Our estimate was 6 million. The 10 million came after ours. I would tell you that neither of them are precisely correct, but you might just simply say there's somewhere between 6 to 10 million lead service lines out there. So this graphic here is designed to show you where those lines might be. And the purple, the green, and the red have the majority of the lead service lines based upon our analysis. About 55% of them are in the states colored red, which does include Michigan. So the idea here is I just wanted to get you sort of sensitized. They are we do estimate that lead service lines, they're not unique to Michigan. They are in every single state. They are affecting communities big and large, but they are not evenly spread across the U.S. The West and the South, the Texas areas, tend to have less lead service lines than the more densely populated areas in the purple, the green, and the red. So let's just take a moment and talk about the Michigan's infrastructure report. When I got the report, quickly opened it, started looking through it. It's a big, important report. I was just overwhelmed. I kind of got it. I thought it was going to be all about water, but I was overwhelmed at what a broad approach it took to infrastructure. And it's exactly the kind of approach that a state needs to take. It takes into account everything that matters to the way of life within any state. I've got all the different sort of sectors identified that there are specific chapters related to. And what I think is critical for the state of Michigan as they go about looking at this is they are thinking big. They have pilot projects identified, or the idea of having pilot projects, which I think is a great way to start small. And the question is, can you scale fast between the small to the thinking big? And really, that's going to be a little bit about what I want to talk about when I get to the efficient utilities. I do want to say that while the report provides goals, it does a really nice job of assessing the need and putting dollars to the need, which they've done right here. And when I turned to this page and I looked at the dollar need to achieve the goal, and I saw that water was just $1 billion, right? Just $19 billion over the 20 years. I immediately got sort of concerned, and in my own sort of 100%, just to be purely honest, 100% bias, I wanted to talk about that just for a minute. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between identifying a gap, identifying a need, and identifying a priority. And in my mind, especially for the people here at this conference, the priority has to be water. I promise you, and in fact, I am living it this moment because my cell phone broke. I was going to use a different word, but it just isn't working. I promise you that that the citizens of Michigan, as much as it would be a hardship, are better off living without Wi-Fi technology than without pure, safe drinking water. All right, I am biased. When you're ripping up the road, fix what's underneath, right? And the communication technology, I get that it's super important, especially for a smart city, which is what I think is part of the vision. But a smart city needs safe drinking water. So there's a need for all four of these sectors to be really, really efficient. There's a gap that's fully identified. But on the priority list, I think the head nod goes to water. And why not? It's your smallest financial gap to fill. So fill that and then move on to the others. That's my selfish little comment. Yeah, thank you. I got one round of applause there. Good. I'll buy you a beer later, right? I was going to buy it for everybody, but forget it now. All right, so let's move on to efficient utilities. So efficient utilities, it sounds like it's a process, which it is, but it's also a thing, right? Efficient utility management it's a framework. It was originally put together 10 years ago by 6 associations plus the US EPA, and now it's been recently updated with 8 contributing great minds putting their shoulder to it. And then it's really based upon what I'm going to call 10 attributes. Attributes is a weird word, but it is the word that the framework uses. It also has management success strategies. I'm not going to go into those, but I do want to talk about the 10 attributes a little bit because I think that they are important for what Michigan wants to achieve in its infrastructure future, and especially what Flint would like to achieve as it relates to water. So here are the 10 attributes, right? And the idea is that an effectively run water utility focuses on all 10 of these. May not focus on all 10 equally all the time, and in fact, going back to my idea of what are the priorities, the framework, the document that lays out the framework, lays out a system to figure out what your priority is. And you work on that priority. Maybe you work on 2 priorities at a time, depending on your capacity. And as you're working on those priorities and as you're keeping the others in view, you're building a better, stronger utility. And every time someone comes to me with a problem related to their utility, I can go back to this framework, and it helps to solve that problem. In the way of background, and just as a note of credibility, I worked for Denver Water for 16 and a half years. I was their CFO, so I'm used to working with water utility challenges for big water utilities. But let me just hit what these 10 attributes are. I'm not going to go into each one of them. I am picking 2 to take a deeper talk about. But the first one at the very top in that red circle is product quality, right? You can't serve a product that doesn't have the right quality. Customer satisfaction, something that's becoming more and more critical to all of our communities. In fact, you just heard people talking about that. Employee leadership and development, operational optimization, financial viability. You can't have a sustainable utility which isn't financially sound. Infrastructure, strategy and performance. Enterprise resilience, how do we respond after bad things happen? Community sustainability, how do our utilities contribute to a community that is sustainable in the other aspects that a community needs, and what is the role of our utility for that? Water resources sustainability, how do we manage our water resources, the sources of supply, so that they're sustainable? Stakeholder understanding and support, similar to but different from customer satisfaction. And so you can see there, all of these things are critical to balancing out a great water utility. So let's take a look at 2 of them. All right, there we go. I want to talk a little bit about employee leadership and development and about infrastructure strategy and performance. In the opposite order that I introduced them, I will start with the infrastructure strategy and performance. So in this attribute, what the goals are is to understand the condition and the cost of your critical infrastructure assessment. And the reason I started with this is that's what the Michigan infrastructure study did. It understands, it's assessed the cost, it's assessed the need. It may not have all of the conditions of all of the assets already identified, but it's along that same vein. It also, I think the infrastructure report also has designed investments that are consistent with the community's needs. What does the community need? And then my question of what are the priorities? Because the study doesn't give a weighting to which priorities are the most important to the community. And then it says we have to maintain and enhance what we have today. And that is a critical piece, because as we talk here and then as I talk in the next attribute, one of the keys of running any great utility is making sure what you build, you operate and maintain, right? What you build has to be operated and maintained. So once these goals are established within this attribute, there's sort of 4 actions and measurements that you as a utility, regardless of which sector you're in, you would step through. And many of these, I think, are relevant to what Flint is doing, needs to do, and then in the reports, and as we go to the other sectors, needs to be done. So asset inventories, where are things? What's their location? What's their age? What's their value? What's the size and the materials? You can see it gets a little bit granular. Renew and replace. Have plans. Here's where our assets are. Here's how old they are. Here's what the material is. Here's the useful life and the experienced life. And now we need to renew and replace those things on predictive bases. Integrity. Measure the leaks. Measure your non-revenue water. In fact, there's a couple talks on that coming up here, which will be spectacular. And then I've already sort of mentioned planning and maintaining. These are all critical, forward-thinking approaches that also honor maintaining the existing infrastructure. And now let's talk about leadership, development of leaders and employees. This is something that is oftentimes overlooked as much as maintaining existing infrastructure. And by the way, when it comes to maintaining, I am like the worst at changing the oil in my car, right? My wife, excellent at it. It's on the calendar, she does it. Her cars last longer, but it's a much better model, but I don't necessarily practice that. But when it comes to our big assets, like utilities, our community assets, we have to practice that. Otherwise, you end up being like me, and you have to go out and find the next used car that you can afford because you didn't maintain your car. But as it relates to this, as it relates to development of your employees, we need competent, motivated employees. They have to get the right amount of training. We have to invest in our employees because these are assets that maintain our communities. So what are we going to measure? You measure retention, measure turnover, look at your core competencies. Do you have job descriptions? Are there performance requirements? Important for the water sector. Are our people certified? Are they getting the training to become certified? And then as it relates to the long-term workforce, do we have succession planning? Draw the difference between a critical employee and a critical position. There are people who are critical to the culture of your community, but then there are people in positions that are critical to the operations. And it's those people, the critical positions, that are most critical to having great employees in, well-educated, well-trained. And the key here is these aren't just the top dogs who get the parking space and sit in the corner office. This is all of your utilities throughout who are the most critical to making sure the product that you provide is safe. Okay, so that's a nice little run at efficient utilities. These ideas that I have here are are available to all of you for free at Water EUM. And you can get it from the AWWA website if you don't remember Water EUM. And then each of those other 8 attributes, there's a lot of detail. And in the report itself, it talks about how do you go about it. I didn't dive into that, but it talks about how do you set up your priority system and how do you identify your priority systems. So just in the way of some final comments, I think that the Michigan report is excellent. I really think it's a great report. It's a great place to start. And I think this idea of thinking big is really important because oftentimes we think, what's practical? What can we do? But this report actually thinks big. I think the strategy of starting with pilot programs is an excellent idea. And it will allow you to learn as you do. And by doing that, hopefully you can scale fast on all of those fronts. And of course, I give the head nod to water. This is really a difficult time in society. In Michigan, I'm sure. In Flint, I'm sure, as it relates to water. I can tell you that AWWA, among other things, we have broken our structure up into 43 different sections. A section for most of you is basically the same thing as a chapter. Bonifer, who's right here, is manning the Michigan section booth, and she leads it from a staff standpoint. And the interesting observation is that as things were unrolling here with Flint, the interesting observation to me, as it was unrolling here in Flint, the Michigan section was often running to try and help. And the association, which is headquartered in Denver, we were off running and trying to help. And we both, independent of each other, had the exact same instincts, and then as we came together, we became a little bit more organized and impactful in trying to help. But it was basically because this is a difficult time for families and for communities, not just here in Flint, but really everywhere. The events that have happened in Flint have reprioritized things for many of the communities all of the communities that we work with. You know, sitting here, I have a great deal of confidence about the future as it relates to water, as it relates to infrastructure for Michigan. And I'm going to, in terms of making this not a good meeting or not a nice meeting, you know, the first thing I would say is please go to EUM and take a look at how you can improve your structure. The second one is I am looking forward, and I think this is really achievable. I'm looking forward to coming back to this conference in the future, and no offense to anyone, but without plastic water bottles on the table. I'm looking forward to coming back and drinking Flint's water, right out of the tap on each of these tables and pitchers. That's what I'm used to, except for when I'm in India. So just 2 final thoughts. First one is what's accomplished here in Flint and in Michigan and in Detroit, those are models for the rest of us. You really have an opportunity in this moment of transition to really make your claim and show the rest of the world, because the rest of the world is watching you, what can be done if we pull together and we do things right. And I do believe that EUM is a framework that can help you achieve those goals. And if you have any questions, AWWA is firmly committed to helping. Our organization has passed a policy statement, which is on our website. We're the only association I know of that has done so. We were one of the founders of this thing called the Lead Service Line Collaborative. It's in Washington, D.C. It is a uniting of organizations that never work together. I mean, never work together. We are always at odds with each other, but we have come together on this common goal. And we are continuing to highlight the importance of lead service lines and lead service line removal and corrosion control treatment and all of the things that we do. And so to the extent that we can look for some sort of silver lining, the awareness that the world has now because of this and the actions that will be taken will hopefully help us all solve this problem around the globe, and not just here in Flint, because I'm confident that that part will happen. And it's not just because I found John Young for you. So thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Thank you for that interview.